Good evening. My name is Nick Dodds, and this talk is about Brazilian culture in Los Angeles. This talk explores the commoditization of Brazilian culture within the city of LA, as well as the balancing between authenticity and stereotype in expressing that culture here. Now, it's worth mentioning that almost no one thinks of LA as a center for Brazilian culture, at least not at first. After all, as these examples would suggest, it is mostly Spanish and English speaking. In fact, Los Angeles was founded in 1781 by Spanish missionaries who created the San Gabriel mission as part of a chain of 14 stretching from the border of Mexico to Northern California. And it almost goes without saying that LA and its cultural exports are considered by many to be the center of worldwide English-speaking influence. The English and Spanish-speaking communities are so tightly interwoven that people miss how many other cultures are embedded in the city. And this is certainly true of Brazilian culture. But indeed, Brazil is here in LA and is a strong cultural component of the city. Citing both the LA Times and a research article entitled Latino Los Angeles, the city's greatest concentrations of Brazilian American businesses began appearing in the late 1980s along Venice Boulevard's north border between Culver City and Palms. Culver City is the home of the Brazil Cultural Center and the Café Brazil. The middle image here is Fogo de Chão, a restaurant in Beverly Hills. In contrast to Latinos and Anglos, the largest group of Brazilians only recently came to the US. The chart on the left shows that the last 10 years have been the greatest growth in the Brazilian diaspora. On the right, you see that the Lusophone cohort has settled along the coasts, California included, but not exclusively. Recent estimates indicate that Los Angeles has tens of thousands of Brazilians. So Brazilians are here, but how are they here? As Maxine Margolis points out in her book, Goodbye Brazil, Emigres from the Land of Soccer and Samba, some Brazilians make their living through what has been called the commoditization of their culture. What Margolis means is that within the Brazilian diaspora, a predominant and very visible method for establishing Brazilian culture is the selling of Brazilian culture. And this is not at all pejorative. After all Angelinos benefit from Brazilian restaurants, Brazilian dance and martial arts studios, and of course, soccer. And I am personally a fan of Brazilian restaurants, so I wanted to use two of them as exemplars. Fogo de Chão here is a high-end Brazilian restaurant in Beverly Hills. Café Brazil is a neighborhood eatery in Culver City. So I compared the two restaurants across 8 axes, or attributes. The first one is location. Fogo de Chão is in a Tony neighborhood in Beverly Hills. As its map outright shows, it's near other upscale restaurants, such as Morton's Steakhouse and a chic and expensive tapas place called Jose Andres. On the other hand, Café Brazil is on Venice Boulevard and near more modest restaurants, such as Shawarma King and Smashburger. So how does the dining experience as a customer compare at each place? Well, in terms of price, Café Brazil is a place that many people can go and perhaps go often, with prices ranging from $10 to $15 per meal. Fogo de Chão, in contrast, is a special event, with prices upwards of $100 per person. As you'd expect, the clientele at each place is very different. Business folks and dates are what you'd see at Fogo de Chão. Pedestrians on Venice Boulevard are who you'd see stop by at Café Brazil. Having been to both, they're both busy and bustling, but in very different ways. Inside of Fogo de Chão, the emphasis is on the idea or myth of Brazil. For example, the mural of Brazilian cowboys, or gauchos, taking up this wall, as well as the waitstaff dressed up as these gauchos, serving traditional cuts of flame-grilled meat in a southern Brazilian fashion. Certainly, this is not typical of Brazilian lives, but is a carefully staged facet of stereotypical Brazil. It's not how day-to-day Brazilian experience plays out either in Brazil or LA. This is a perfect example of a commoditized experience of Brazil. Café Brazil has a much simpler interior and is what you'd expect from a counter-service restaurant. A few details are worth mentioning. The TV here is usually playing a Brazilian soccer game, complete with enthusiastic commentary and impressive extensions of the word goal. On the wall, the pictures and drawings represent Brazil, but they represent today's Brazil, and are most often in Portuguese, not English. Here are two pictures I took. One is of a map of Brazil with the states labeled in Portuguese, and another is of a penalty kick of a soccer game, and below are two pictures of famous Brazilian soccer players. In both places, the food was excellent, but only at Café Brazil was every dish served with feijão, the beans that are the staple of the Brazilian diet. While I was at Café Brazil, I had the chance to interview Georgie, one of the chefs there. I asked him if he liked working here and if he thought Café Brazil was an authentic Brazilian restaurant. He responded yes to both. I also asked him if he was familiar with Fogo de Chão in Beverly Hills, and he'd said he'd heard of it but hadn't gotten the chance to go. Finally, I asked him who generally eats at Café Brazil to gauge the clientele, and he responded, the entire neighborhood of Culver City. Now, it's too sweeping to draw conclusions about the whole Brazilian diaspora based on these two examples. But it's clear from these two case studies that both the commoditized and authentic Brazilian experience are part of the expressed Brazilian culture in LA. Fogo de Chão is really like a Hollywood set. It's not real, but it presents a story about Brazil. Café Brazil much better reflects the lived experience of Brazilians and others in LA. Like the US, Brazilian culture has both commoditized and authentic expressions, and both are successful. Some of my sources felt that this adaptability meant that Brazil was the country of the future, and perhaps even the next America. On the other hand, another source pointed out a long-standing Brazilian joke, which is that, indeed, Brazil is the country of the future, and always will be. From these case studies, I certainly won't be surprised whichever of these views turns out to be true. I'd like to finish up by thanking Ms. Mingarelli, Dr. Jula, Ms. Rogstad, Ms. Basidi, Katie and Sienna, and Anjali and Bella. Thank you.